A policy that simultaneously reduces congestion and raises revenues should be a slam dunk, but it isn't. Why congestion pricing is so difficult to implement, coming your way. This is City Nerd, weekly content on cities and transportation. Viewer suggested topics always welcome down in the comments. And congestion pricing is a topic that's been on my list since the beginning of the channel, but I've kind of been procrastinating on it because it's such a complex topic and I just didn't really know where to start. So what I'm gonna do is what I always do, which is kind of peel it apart and focus on the math. There are all kinds of interesting aspects I'm not gonna talk about today, like what you spend the revenues on, how public opinion tends to shift in favor once it gets implemented, and all the different ways it can be implemented. Instead, today I'm just going to focus on a single use case, which I think is the best one, which is congestion pricing as a way to address climate change by reducing vehicle miles traveled and congestion. So I think most of my viewers will agree that reducing the amount of driving has climate benefits. Even if we're talking about electric cars, the electricity that keeps the battery charged often comes from fossil fuel sources. But everyone may not agree that reducing or eliminating congestion is a worthwhile policy goal. I mean, I've heard it said that congestion is itself a sign of a healthy and vibrant city. But really, congestion is a classic tragedy of the commons. When everyone tries to drive at peak hour, we're all trying to do what we believe is in our own self-interest. But the result is more delay, more frustration, and really just abject chaos. Think of it this way. What if you operated a golf course, but instead of accepting reservations and scheduling groups of 4 to go off the first tee every 10 minutes, you just made it a free-for-all and you had people show up whenever they felt like it and just flooded the course with golfers? It would be complete anarchy. Nobody would ever operate a golf course this way, but it's how we operate our transportation system. There are more benefits to eliminating congestion than I'm gonna get into here, but one I want everyone to think about is buses get stuck in the same congestion cars do. I mean, unless you build expensive, contentious bus-only lanes. But with a good congestion pricing scheme, would you even need bus-only lanes? Just something to think about. So there are all kinds of objections to congestion pricing you'll hear, like it's just a new tax on something I've always gotten for free, or I don't trust the public sector to manage anything like this in a competent way, or even in a way that isn't corrupt. I mean, trust in bureaucracy has to be close to an all-time low, and that's not even a left-right thing. But on its technical merits, pricing does seem to be a win-win. It reduces congestion by right-sizing the amount of traffic relative to the roadway system you have. And it generates revenue that you can use to improve other travel options. So here's what I want to talk about today, and it is what I think is the #1 stumbling block for pricing, and why it hasn't really been implemented in North America at all. It's the criticism that congestion pricing is regressive. That is, it disproportionately impacts lower income people and benefits higher income people. Let's go back to a scenario I drew up for my video on how congestion is a nonlinear phenomenon. In the video, I shared a hypothetical scenario of a left turn phase at a signal where signal cycle failure is occurring when the demand for the movement is 150 vehicles an hour. But if the demand is scaled back to 120 vehicles an hour, then there's no cycle failure. All the vehicles are served during the cycles when they arrive, so there's no additional delay. If you haven't watched the video, I do encourage you to check it out because it does really go to the heart of what makes congestion pricing work. So let's extrapolate this to a system level, but keep it simplified. Let's say that if a city's transportation system has 15,000 vehicles on it, the network is congested and each vehicle averages 20 minutes of additional delay. But if the system only has 12,000 vehicles on it, we've eliminated signal cycle failure everywhere. Everything runs smoothly and there's no additional delay from congestion. So here's where pricing comes in. To get the system to run efficiently, we want to remove 1 out of every 5 cars from the network. And to do that, we're going to charge drivers $8. You can think of this as being a cordon scheme like London or Stockholm or Singapore, but there are lots of ways to do this, maybe for a future video. So let's look at 5 representative vehicles on the network. We'll talk about how 20 minutes of delay affects them and how they might respond to an $8 charge. First, we've got a delivery truck that carries a load of microprocessors from a chip manufacturing plant to the airport to put on a flight to Taiwan every day. The manufacturing plant's entire production chain depends on getting this multi-million-dollar shipment to the airport every day. And the cost of that additional 20 minutes every day is well in excess of, say, $10,000. So if you offer them those 20 minutes for $8, it's the deal of the century. This is an extreme case, but the general idea is going to be true for a lot of freight movement. The benefit of the time they get back is going to far outweigh whatever the congestion charge is. Let's say our other 4 vehicles are people commuting to work. For this, we have to talk about value of time. In this sort of analysis, typically, an individual's value of time is a function of whatever their imputed hourly wage is. So without getting into a whole lot of detail, let's say we have a doctor who values their time at $150 an hour, an accountant who values their time at $45 an hour, a teacher at $30 an hour, and a minimum wage service worker, and let's say that's $15 an hour. So a simple way to figure out how much that 20 minutes is worth to each person is to prorate the hourly number and compare that to the price being offered. When you do this, it's easy to see that everyone comes out ahead on this proposition, some more than others, but not our minimum wage worker. In reality, the calculation is a lot more complicated, and it depends on the options you have available for replacing that car trip. For example, if our teacher has a transit trip available that's only 5 minutes longer than the car trip, they might shift modes rather than pay the $8 charge. If the minimum wage worker's best replacement is a transit trip that's an hour longer, they might just suck it up and pay the $8. It's kind of like, I don't know, baseball analytics. It's all about value over replacement. But regardless of how we do the calculation, it should be pretty clear that freight comes out light years ahead, higher income people come out way ahead, middle income people mostly come out even or better, but the people on the lower economic rungs come out worse. So is congestion pricing regressive? Well, yeah, I think it's fair to say the costs and benefits of pricing are not distributed evenly, and the largest benefits do accrue to people who are already well off financially. Welcome to capitalism. So should we abandon congestion pricing because it's regressive? Well, lots of things in life are regressive. The fact that the price of a head of iceberg lettuce is the same for everyone is also regressive. One way of tackling this is, well, we can administer a convoluted, administratively burdensome suite of exemptions to make sure every industry or demographic that could possibly be harmed by pricing gets made whole. It's a slippery slope, though. The whole point of a congestion pricing scheme is to broadcast a clear price signal when you drive at a certain time or in a certain geography. So instead of setting up a bunch of exemptions, my thing is just design a tax credit, something that's applied progressively, brand it as a green transportation dividend or something. But just give money to the people who would otherwise come out worse. And if they want to use it to pay for congestion charges, they can do that. And if they want to pocket it and use a different option, like taking transit or riding their e-bike or whatever, they can do that too. Anyway, I have a lot of viewers in the New York area. Let me know what you think about the current plans for rolling this thing out. I think it's targeted for late 2023. Knock on wood. I'm going to talk about some of the other ways we can view the value proposition of congestion pricing in a minute. But first, just a reminder to drop a like on the video, subscribe if you're new, check out the Patreon if you're interested in supporting the channel more directly. I did post bonus material for the patrons last week, just something to think about. Sub count check, the channel now has enough subscribers to fill Kauffman Stadium, home of the Kansas City Royals. Look, to me, there aren't any bad baseball stadiums once you get inside the stadium, but look at this thing. It's like the very definition of a parking crater. Where do people go to pre-function or, I don't know, celebrate after a big win? I mean, I guess there's a Denny's and a Taco Bell, although honestly, I don't know if I expected more from Kansas City. So I've showed you a very simplified way of applying the value of time to illustrate the equity problem that goes to the heart of why congestion pricing is so difficult. As always, when it comes to traffic though, the way things play out in an actual city with an actual transportation network is much more complicated. In the earlier example, I focused on commuters and like microprocessors, but of course, there are way more trip types than that. In transportation modeling, work trips and freight movement are big pieces of the overall traffic volume, but you want to account for other trips households generate too. So yeah, maybe there's someone driving to work at an accounting firm, but there's also someone driving to the grocery store. There's someone driving to the gym. There's someone driving their kids to school. There's someone who's driving their pregnant spouse who just went into labor to the hospital. And there's someone side hustling for like Grubhub or Uber Eats who's driving to pick up a burger and fries from a restaurant and then delivering it to someone who lives like a quarter of a mile away. I assume you're gonna have higher willingness to pay for some of those trips than others, but can someone even explain the DoorDash business model to me? They're literally using up capacity on our unpriced transportation system to deliver food that you could probably just walk to. Also, fries just aren't really very good more than like 10 minutes after they come out of the fryer. Like, if you've ever worked in a restaurant, you know how hard the kitchen works to get plates out and how annoyed the cooks get if a plate sits in the window for more than like 60 seconds. I just don't get it. Anyway, here's the punchline. In this hypothetical, all these trips are generated by the same household, but the household is going to value them all differently. Getting someone to the hospital is pretty high value, and delivering soggy fries is maybe not. I talked in my cost of driving video about how a lot of the marginal costs of driving are intentionally obscured. In fact, all the trips I just talked about could be perceived as essentially free if the trips don't involve a stop at the gas station. Well, a congestion charge is an opportunity to have a strong price signal for every trip so everyone can make a rational decision on whether a trip even makes sense to make by car, and really revisit how they think about accomplishing daily activities. And yeah, it is fair to say congestion pricing is intrinsically regressive, but the solutions to that really aren't that difficult, especially compared to the problems that arise from a default, unpriced transportation system. Okay, that's all I've got. Thanks for joining today, and thanks to all the folks who are supporting the channel on Patreon. Keep the great topic suggestions coming. I'll be back with a new episode next week, and I'll see you then.